Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Transformation Leaders Podcast. I'm Sean Ennis. I am joined with my wonderful partner in crime, David Soden. And with my wintry theme behind me, you can see we're talking about the end of 2025. What a huge year it was in digital transformation, and want to take time to talk about some of the things that worked and didn't work this year. And so I came up with some of the large things that have happened this year and want to go through them to see if we can learn from what 2025 is as we're looking forward to 2026. David?
Yep. All right. Well, let's start off with this revolution that happened in 2025. I'm going to start with the middle column because there were news cycles back in January saying that 2025 is the year of agentic AI. And we had just come off of 2024, which is essentially the year of just generative AI or chatbots. And, all these things were all of the rage. And in 2022, everybody's like, duh. And so, what just happened? And so, I don't even think, God, if I can even remember it was the end of 2022. But in any event, so bottom line here is there was countless large language models released. And I might be getting ahead of myself, but I think we even talked about its derivative of the SLM or the small language model. Feels like, I don't know, maybe back in October, September timeframe-ish. Then we talked about all of that. And then all of this innovation around quantum computing and innovation around all of that. And of course, you've got Google in there ending out the year in a phenomenal Gemini 3-way, putting literally OpenAI on its heels in code red mode, dropping everything that they had in the works for priority, kind of slammed the brakes on all of that just to play now catch up. So. And then, of course, in the middle of the year, we had DeepSeek with the large language model showing literally impacted global financial markets worldwide. Like Nvidia's stock crashed, everybody's stock crashed. It was not a pretty day at all when DeepSeek came out. But there was a lot of great information, a lot of great lessons learned, and a lot of realizations with regards to finance and who can do what with what little bit of information. And of course, a whole bunch of, I don't know if espionage is the right word, but there was a bunch of stuff that was going on behind the scenes, a bunch of things that came to light after the fact. And then, of course, some big players and some disappointments with that. Unfortunately and sadly, I hate to say it, it's just the truth. I've used it. I personally wasn't that impressed. And of course, if you've not been living under a rock, you saw the news cycles where Llama 4 and the Llama drama happened. Just lackluster performance, just all the way around, not good at all. And we're probably honestly going to see the same from OpenAI as they go into code red mode with this, what is it, 5.2 release that they're trying to scramble to the end of the year. So not waiting with bated breath for any of that. But at least comes to, from top of mind, those are the main things that stuck out to me. What in those categories, Sean, what stood out for you?
For me, rise of agentic AI is the term. Agentic AI is what has risen. So, remember we talked about large action models. Remember LAMs instead of LLMs? I remember that. So I think agentic AI is now the coalesced term for chatbots and large action models and next best actions and the answer to robotic process automation, right? That is the new thing. Now, has it risen? I think it's still rising. I think the cake is still baking, but there's a lot of traction there. Now, it's just so obvious to me that it is now the norm that new large language models will be released with new features, with new capabilities. There is always candy in the stocking. for those who are looking for their eye candy for AI. Yeah. And I think all of us should remember that it is eye candy. Unless it directly solves a business problem, it is more likely to cause you to lose focus than solve a problem. But that doesn't mean that we can't all indulge in some candy every once in a while. But I think that proof for the last 3 years is that large language models will continue to be released in different forms, factors, and feeds, and that's just going to be the norm into the foreseeable future. Grok 5 is out in a couple months. A lot of people are thinking that's going to be something. Gemini 3. What was great about the Gemini 3? It was the first time I've ever seen a model release where all the other model providers kind of did a golf clap.
Yeah.
And perhaps that, there's a lot more gentlemanly conduct amongst the players moving forward. OpenAI and Meta are two that, as you pointed out, took a step back in their maturity. And what we have said for the last 2 years, David, I think is absolutely true. It's still the time to date, not marry these models.
Yeah. I think that Google, in my opinion, set the bar for what we're going to see out of a lot of these hyperscalers moving forward. You're especially hyperscalers that have models like Google. I'm not convinced, and I don't know that Microsoft is going to come forward with Microsoft Phi anytime soon, or whatever their latest version of their internal model is. And of course, AWS is leveraging a lot of their Bedrock stuff with Anthropic. So I don't think we're going to see it there. But for those that do provide hyperscaler services, in addition to large language models, you're going to see, I think, a lot of consolidation of services. If you think back to writing code and machine level code, and then you think of programming languages like .NET, or you think of PHP. These are interpreter languages. They're between machine code and they're more user-friendly. Anyway, the whole point is all the moving parts that go into creating an agentic solution are going to collapse. So you'll have, from a programmatic standpoint, from an implementation standpoint, you'll have more of a single entry point, and all of that heavier lifting that you've been used to over the last 2 years. I think you're going to see less and less of that. It's going to become easier, more ubiquitous. You're going to see people that don't have any coding experience, hence we forgot that you're at Vibe Coding. Oh my God. And so
I'm sure that's on the list. I'm sure it's on the list. I mean, what I want to make sure everybody remembers is that I think it's pretty obvious now. There's a lot of people out there who are like, hey, Coke always tastes better than Pepsi. That's we're starting to see that personal foibles is what drives large language behavior right now, which I think is hilarious, right? I still like my Claude. They may not have the best model, but you know what? I give them my money for subscription, right? So I think that's going to continue. But basically everybody is building, and that's great for all of us who want options. Yeah. And that is what's so good. The last thing I want to point out, the quantum computing is been a big nothing burger. A lot of people tried to make it big. I'm sure in the future it may be big. Great technical R&D strides are made. The same thing in nuclear, research and stuff like this. That's great. It's still half a decade away. So really good there. Now, in the area of regulation and specialization, we're seeing pretty significant things. The AI deregulation shift has been tremendous in 2025. The U.S. has now kind of staked it for the rest of the world that AI is going to be unleashed, whereas the EU was quite clear this year that they want very rigid requirements. And so this has been a really interesting year. I mean, again, I can tell you when I showed Google, Grok Imagine to my parents and I took an old, ugly picture of when I was 5 years old with a family and turned it into a GIF, they were blown away, right? So this technology is asking a whole bunch of questions. There are people who are falling in love with chatbots. And so I think this is going to continue and even accelerate, despite a lot of people wanting it to have as little regulation as possible. David, what are your thoughts on these two areas?
So U.S. governance, I think you mainly covered it. I mean, with the current president in office, he has definitely reduced the barriers, and we're seeing that contrast. Obviously, we don't expect anything much different than China. I think they behave predictably in the way that we've always seen them in the past about most technology. So not much change there. But yeah, the EU most definitely is clamping down. Now, not from a regulatory perspective so much, or even governance, but I am seeing a lot of activity out of Africa and skilling up, and just a tremendous investment into the region, into the area. I have a couple of extracurricular activities and stuff that are technology based. Some of it's based in AI, and I'm seeing an uptick, much like we saw in India back in the day. So for anybody looking for governance, compliance, rules, regulations, the next wave, the next outsourcing wave, keep your eye on Africa over the next 5 years. I think you're going to be really surprised. You're going to see a lot of activity. It may be even a place to go to if you're looking for a place like the United States or another alternative place outside of the US that doesn't have a strong regulatory, well, I say that almost tongue in cheek. Depends on which area in Africa. So just depends on what's going on. But obviously South Africa and so even certain other regions have just exponentially really picked up in that area. Anyway, so watch those areas for relaxed regulations, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Specialized large language models and micro LLMs. Yeah. Raspberry Pi, I've seen a little bit of activity on that for edge computing that definitely isn't going to die, but maybe it's just because everything in large language models and AI have taken front and center stage. You don't hear much about edge computing too much anymore, but it has not gone away by any means. Kinesis uptake in Amazon, which is one of the earpieces that these edge computing componentry speaks to, that's going strong. As a matter of fact, a lot of new changes and updates on that front. Specialized LLMs, I think these are more going in lines with, these highly regulatory compliant type of industries where they themselves, meaning the companies or the providers, mainly in medical, they're having hard times getting past or through regulatory requirements. And so they're just resorting to specialized large language models. They're building their own, they're building it off their own knowledge. And it's a way of just keeping it inside the walls, inside the house. It's their data anyway to begin with. And as long as there's no leakage to going outside the walls, it's working well for them, and it's reduced friction for them to get past. Other than that, I don't really have too much more that I've had in experience with all of that. I don't know if that jarred any memory for you to.
Yeah. I mean, we did a podcast on an SLM, right?
Yep.
We showed how you can create your own and how much data you need to create these. And that the value of synthetically generated data versus hard data and the accuracy difference between them. So yeah, there's a lot.
So, Sean, I don't know if you can hear me, but you are frozen for me. Your audio, at least on my side, so I'm not sure if we're transmitting, but just wanted to raise that flag. We got a technical difficulty on the field.
Yep.
I heard a little bit come through, but it was delayed.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you now. Smooth. Good. Now your video's starting to catch up.
Sorry about that. You got to love it when the providers, your internet provider has a bad day. But we did a call this year about distilling large language models. This is how the DeepSeek worked. We talked about building your own specialized language model. So we talked about different governance with a special guest this year. So I'd love to point out that we've been talking about these things, and these are considered very big things moving forward. I know several of the clients that we talk to on a regular basis are looking for specialized language models or even interested in building their own. This is what made NVIDIA a $4 trillion company.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of this. Personally, my prediction is we're going to see specialized LLMs or custom created ones come into play more and more. And one of the reasons for that is, so if you're not completely up to tune, and I'm not going to go into any great details at length, but just suffice to say, if you're a leader and you're looking for a way to snapshot and freeze your technology, because this technology moves so quick, so fast, as we just talked about in the last slide, these large language models are being released like fast food delivers, food out of the window. As soon as you get it, it's eaten, gobbled up, and gone, and it's next. And so you need to stabilize your infrastructure. You need to stabilize what you're doing. And one of the ways you can freeze that and secure it is to create your own large language model. And if it's solid, it's stable, it stays there, you don't have to worry about it. You got plenty of time then to test the next greatest, latest thing. And you can control your own destiny, your own release schedule, because if you're trying to keep up with the Joneses and you're running live with OpenAI or running live with Gemini, it's painful. It's extremely painful. Like every 2 to 3 weeks, you're having to retest everything just to retest whatever the flavor of the week is. So yeah, I would say keep a strong eye out on that from now, 2026, all the way into 2027. I think we're going to see a big uptake in this.
Yeah. So we talked about this before in the AI agentic space, but hyperautomation, meaning RPA. Agentics is RPA at this point, right? That's what I am hearing. That's what I'm seeing is that people are interested in solving problems, workflow management with agentics. And, reskilling wise, the technique or the skill that everybody needs to know how to do, and everybody is horrible at doing it, prompting, is the next big thing. And so much so now that I am getting people at my kids' school, at church, friends of my parents. Hey, tell me how to prompt. You must know how to prompt. So I would implore anybody who thinks that they know how to prompt, double check, learn these skills because they are really the difference maker right now. It is the difference between you being able to use a computer and you not being able to use computer 30 years ago. If you couldn't use a desktop 30 years ago, if you couldn't use how to do Word, Excel, I remember my dad telling me when I was a wee boy that he got a promotion solely because he knew how to use spreadsheets in Lotus 1-2-3 as a sales guy. This is the type of differentiation as a worker you will have in this century is your ability to use AI.
Yep, just a shameless or selfless plug. It's free. If you go to aiGetStarted.com, a copy of my ebook is up there. Obviously, you can get a printed copy on Amazon if you want, but the free digital copy is there. Just go ahead and download it. And if you start on page about 107, I go through a bunch of different prompts in there, but also to show you how to install LM Studio, where you can put it on your machine and you can practice right there in the safety of your own computer without even having to execute anything on a large language model outside of the machine. So just food for thought there. As far as RPA, I think this is another 2026, 2027 thing, because we saw bits and pieces of this from OpenAI with things coming out. Claude this year also released their plug-in to Chrome and allows you to essentially control a lot of things at the browser level. I think for the actual desktop, I have not seen anything from an AI company that has been baked in, unless, of course, you write it yourself. But I think for your traditional command line things that's going on, whether it's Linux or Apple, meaning the terminal, or you're talking about command line on Windows, I think you're going to have to resort to your traditional RPA components. If you are looking and you're at least on a Windows machine, I'm not mistaken, Sean, you use a Mac. Maybe this is available, or maybe you've even explored or played with it. I've got a Mac too, but I've never thought to even download it until just now. I use Microsoft's Power Automate. It is built into Windows 11 anyway, and you can use it locally to just automate stuff on your own desktop. And I know on Mac, because I have a Mac, I forget what they call it. It's called Automate or something like that. It's just an app, and you can automate RPA level stuff even on your own Mac. It's built in Mac OS. It comes along for the ride for free. So explore and play with those tools.
Automator.
That was it. Yep. That's it. And the point that I'm trying to make here is that even if you don't have anything to technically do with it, it's good to wrap your head around, using it, seeing how it works, because when you apply agentics in a layer over that or to that to process information, then you can start to see in really good and interesting ways, hey, how can I apply this to this problem at work, or to this client that I'm working with, or to whatever the case may be. So I think we're going to see RPA agents as native applications, not just browser components, come probably in the next year to 2 years is going to be my guess.
Yeah. I mean, again, we did a great video on N8N very, very early in the year. It may have even been last year, in 2024. So I would really recommend, if you don't have anything, you can start there. And the basic skills and limits that N8N has is pretty good bellwether for any of the other more mature, higher quality kind of offerings that are out there, so that you could you could play in your sandbox for free and break whatever you want. So I know a lot of people are interested in learning and running fast with scissors. I tell everybody, get a nice sandbox, throw some use cases at it, and that way you'll understand how big the breadbox is. So,
yeah.
Well, let's see.
On N8N too, they're releasing 2.0 in 5 days. So brand new version coming out. Radically much, I mean, if it goes without saying, it was great before, but with 2.0, they've got a bunch of additional features around MCP context and using literally now your N8N instance as an MPC server, which means all of the workflow automations can be controlled via an MCP server, via an AI. So just unbelievable leaps and bounds technology. So definitely check out the new version that's coming out.
So the model architecture, some of the changes that have happened, first and foremost, the advent of 128K token windows. huge changes in the past year with how big the token windows are. So this means you can now have a conversation. I mean, I know I have conversations in queue that I keep running forever, right? I know my young kids like to play D&D, so I use Grok to be our dungeon master, right? So that everybody has fun. And we can just continue that in perpetuity. It's really powerful to have these large windows because it opens up for people like me who want to use it in many different ways, a lot more flexibility. And I think we've talked extensively about tokens and token windows in the past, David.
We have, but I do want to bring up a point, and this reminds me of something that recently had come out, and it's a great topic for year in review because just last month, Claude, who makes Claude Code, this is the geek thing that we had showed, I think a week or two ago, or maybe even just the last show. And that context window, it has the ability to summarize and roll up to continue the conversation. But what it does is it takes everything that was in context and it kind of strips and boils it down and summarizes it. And just recently, they had announced the feature, and I had run into it just the other day, and I was so glad to see it. In Claude Desktop, not Claude Code, but Claude Desktop. This is the one that business people will use, or just anybody that's non-technical. That feature has now been brought over. Now, I used to exclusively use Claude Code for that one reason. I hated the desktop because when you run out of the context window, instead of it doing anything or continuing, it would tell you to open up a new conversation, a new chat. It would just die mid-sentence. And I was like, And so I hated that. But now that feature that we had in Claude Code has been brought over into Claude Desktop. So if you're a Claude user or an Anthropic fan, this is a new feature that's come through for that. So definitely good job to the team there. So, yep, just wanted to bring that one up real quick. I don't have personally, I got to be honest with you, a lot of the low-level architecture because I don't get involved at building those each and every day, but a good resource probably to share with the team as it relates to this. I think we shared this earlier, Sean, but if not, let me see if I can build a banner real quick for folks here. It's called AI Mode Analysis, and I may be able to share the screen at some point later on in the show. I'll see if I can try to get this going here. But if you have an opportunity, it's artificial analysis. Sorry, let me rephrase. Artificialanalysis.ai. And this is the website that compares all of the architectures, all of the values. It gets and breaks down each and every point, metric point for all of the large language models that are out there, both publicly available as well as some of those that you might find privately on Hugging Face, maybe not to the depth that they do, but it provides a really nice executive overview. So if you're looking for the latest and greatest or most performant in those architecture and the evolution of it, it's a great site. I live on it just about every time I see an announcement come up because I'm like, ooh, where do they fall in the stack? Where does it fit?
I mean, again, we talked about distillation and the DeepSeek. So there's been plenty of updates this year when it comes down to what model changes have been made. And if you're familiar with all the silicon that is changing in this space, going beyond GPUs into more ASICs, Google's, I believe it's called Ironwood, and TPUs that are going to do inference and separating what hardware you use for creating models versus using models. It's going to be interesting. I'm sure we'll talk about more of that in 2026. But, we went into detail on this as well as far as chat bots to autonomous agents, that instead of just answering your questions, doing your bidding. And that really did solidify. A great example of this is all the Black Friday news that we got this year on how much people are using and how many businesses are integrating with AI large language model providers, the Geminis, the Chat GPTs of the world, so that when you ask a question about something, they will give you a link so that you could just buy it there.
These are really good, powerful agents now. And I think one thing that we definitely saw from, generative AI in 2024 into 2025 is this agentic year of agentics. And it's taking things all the way from initial concept or conversation and executing it all the way to the end. So people are getting hooked up with, let's just say you're chatting with a chatbot and your physician, and you're saying, hey, I need to make an appointment to see whatever. Not only will you talk to the chatbot, but it will go ahead, it will connect into the provider's system. It gets you scheduled. You get your text messages, your confirmations, everything's put into their system. And that just kicks off the process all through and through. It goes all the way into the back end as far as even registering everything with the potential bill code that needs to be submitted to the payer provider on the back end with regards to, say, if you had Cigna, United Healthcare, or whatever your provider is there. And it will pre-authorize that visit for you, taking all of that behind the scenes that you as a provider saying, hey, I don't feel good, I need an appointment. You don't see any of that. But business to the business, all of these things are happening behind the scenes, taking it all the way end to end. Really, really great, powerful stuff.
And really the exclamation point, and we did, I believe, a very detailed call, right? Things that if your job could be impacted or not impacted. Microsoft did a great study on this. We did a podcast about the market and how this is changing the market today. I have friends who are in the market for a job nowadays, and they are saying that it is dramatically impacting things. I have nieces and nephews who are coming out of college who are very worried about these things. Seeing reports from getting your first job in your industry is becoming more and more difficult. Middle management is getting minimized. So that's certainly the negatives of this. But I can tell you, of the founders that I regularly talk to, there's never been a more exciting time, because now you can build with less capital. You can build faster. So if you have an idea, taking that idea to market can be so much more efficient. I was talking to a founder just today about this. I'm hoping to have her on in the new year to talk about this particular thing. So there are pluses, meaning that if you have an idea, you're going to be able to move much faster. If you are a digital transformation expert, your ability to impact and drive change within your organization, it's never been a lower bar. But on the flip side is, if your value was tied to monotonous minutia, you're in trouble. And unfortunately, middle management, who has to do annual performance reviews and manage alignment and consolidation to policy, low-level training, or maybe it's just your first job in the marketplace, these things are terrible news for you. And I'll give you the same advice I give to those people who come to me and say, Sean, what do I do? Learn how to build. Pick something that is interesting to you, use AI to build it, and use that for your resume. That is going to be the huge differentiator. If you can show people that you have ideas and you can bring them to reality without any capital or resources. I haven't met one hiring corporation who isn't interested in hiring those people.
Yeah. I think that's probably the biggest, easiest skill, because I think a lot of people, even hearing or watching the show, irregardless of whether you're watching it live or after the fact on a replay, creative thinking is like the easy path out. It is the path of least resistance, but it does require you to be a thought leader. And there are courses out there for thought leadership. If you take what you've done historically, the industries that you've worked in, you can think about the problems. I highly encourage you to go up, and this is one of the things I did early this year, and I'm still using it in various formats. Create yourself. It's free, and most people probably either have forgotten about it, that it exists, or don't know it exists at all. But it's called Google Alerts, and you can set basically a Google search query on automation, and it can email you all of the latest and greatest articles that have a hit on that Google search. And you can have it do it in real time. You can have it do it as a roll up. You can even put it in as an RSS feed, which is what I personally do, and then feed it into N8N, and I automate and blah, 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 all kinds of stuff on it. But my point here is that you don't have to be a geek or a rocket scientist to figure out how to use this. If you can use Google and you can search the internet, you can become a thought leadership by staying abreast of the problems that's going on in your industry or your industry of interest. Maybe you want to change industries, and go and find what the heck is the pain. What are they facing? Ask top 10, pain points by legal or healthcare or manufacturing or whatever, and find out what those are, and work with your large language model of choice and say, I noticed these are the top 10 problems. What are some of the solutions to those problems? And then position yourself on LinkedIn, write articles, say, hey, listen, this is how I'd solve this problem. Hey, listen, this is how I'd solve that problem. While you're applying for jobs, when you apply for jobs, if you're lucky enough to get an interview, point the recruiter or point the person to your most recent postings. They're going to look for that anyway. But these are the things that you can do to either become a consultant, or the things that you can do to get more recognition, say on LinkedIn or wherever the case may be, to make you look like a thought leader. Because if not, as Sean said, you're going to have to become a builder, because that's where it pretty much is. As AI goes to take over, you're either going to be a thought leader to solve problems this way, it's going to hand it to a builder, or you're going to be both, or just the builder. I don't know that there's too much wiggle room after that. It's pretty much what, either left or right or both.
Yep. And being able to show that you have the ability to do both is incredibly important. So I guess I'll stop there, David. Yep. What else in 2025 do you remember?
Top of head, I think we've covered most of the major ones that's there. I don't really have anything, to be honest, that stands out, other than just maybe some housekeeping things for everybody watching. Obviously, this is a year in the review. We are at the 17th of December, 2025. And so the following 2 weeks of this year is going to be Christmas Eve, which we are going to take off. And then we have New Year's Eve on the 31st, which we're also going to take off for obvious reasons. Hopefully everybody's joining in on the celebration and stuff. So we will see you guys back on the 7th, where we've got a whole bunch of stuff planned for you guys. We'll talk about some new things. We'll hope to have some new guests. I think Sean and I even kicked around the idea of maybe even showing you how to build your own resume rebuilder, so to speak. So whatever your resume is, we'll have it extrapolate that information out, so you can build like a skill pool essentially in the background, and maybe feed it a link or feed it the job description, and it'll rewrite your resume. But we'll show you how to maybe build something like that. And then we've just got really an action-packed year for you. And obviously we're going to ride the surf wave as we did and as we always do, because just as soon as we think, hey, that would be a cool show, something came out and changed everything that we were going to talk about. And now there's something new or a different twist or an angle on that one. So I don't know, anything else that you want to add before we wish everybody a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and the rest?
No, again, great year working with you, David. Really appreciate all your leadership and looking forward to another great year of us doing amazing things together.
Absolutely. And look forward to everybody else joining. Without you guys, this wouldn't be possible either. So definitely look forward to growing our subscribers. If you have a friend that you think might be interested or needs to know about this information, pass along. We're available on LinkedIn. We're available also out there in YouTube. And if you haven't seen it already, at the bottom of the screen, there's a URL code, which is our website. You can get a hold of Sean and I there on LinkedIn. And of course, there's a QR code that's there that'll take you straight to the URL as well. But anyway, that's it for this show. And this year, we're going to wrap it up here. Thanks a lot, everybody. We'll see you next year. Bye-bye.